I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. My ears are wide open. My eyes are now open to see what I may be. I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. I'm listening. I am listening. In this moment of Spirit, speak through me. I can hear the voices of all my kind. I'm listening, singing. I am listening, this tweeting and howling into the wind. My ears are wide open, and oh, the joy. My eyes are wide open, oh, the love to see what here for you and me. Oh, I'm listening in this moment of silence. I am listening. I hear Spirit speak through me. Did you sleep well? Mm-hmm. Can I ask you a favor? Can you go and push with Jake for 5 minutes while I finish? You see I'm doing some worky stuff.
For 5 seconds?
5 minutes. You'll see how long. It's not very long.
How many seconds is 5 minutes?
Well, it's 300 seconds, but you don't have to count to 300. I'll just be in there to get you when I'm all done, okay?
So who's gonna have to count to 300?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Our opening words are from Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Like fighting an addiction, being an anti-racist requires persistent self-awareness, constant self-criticism, and regular self-examination. Welcome to today, October 11th, 2020, and the service for the Unitarian Universalist Church of Meadville. I'll remind you that you can always enter a joy and sorrow in the chat, and we've placed joys and sorrows a little later in the service than we're used to, so that you have as much time as possible to chat in your joy or sorrow. Please remember that you can always go to the church's website if you would like to donate. And I have a third announcement. Tomorrow, some communities will celebrate Columbus Day, and many other communities will honor Indigenous Peoples Day. May we remember that the Seneca and other tribal people lived in the area we now live in.
Our covenant is to be a loving, joyful community that nurtures spiritual growth, promotes compassion, social responsibility, and service in an atmosphere of mutual respect. Our mission is to be a faith community devoted to love and respect, reason, and justice. And if any of you, Amy, are you or are I doing that? I forget which.
I can do this.
Okay, go ahead. I'll light the church chalice in the meantime.
Perfect. If you'd like to read along at home and light your own candles during our chalice lighting, this is by Eric Walker Wickstrom. Here today, in this place, and with these people, may we listen so that we can hear. May we hear so that we can feel. May we feel so that we can know. And may we know so that we can change ourselves and this world. May this chalice we light our way. And up next, we have our first hymn, our only hymn, I should say, Spirit of Life. We found a beautiful recording that was shared with us by the UU Church of South Hills, Pittsburgh. And I wanted to try having a recorded hymn just to see how that went. So feel free, please, to stay muted and sing along.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
This is a partly true story, but originally it goes back to ancient times with old famous Zen sayings from Japan. But as I say, this is a partly true story. Zen student enters the Zen master's interview room. He bows to his teacher. She bows back. He asks, how do I become, or I want to become awakened and clear? She looks at him in silence. The student asks again, how can I awaken? She says, sit down, shut up, pay attention. She then rings the bell to say the interview is over. The student bows and leaves the room. And just as he walks out the door, the Zen teacher says, you forgot to take your shoes off when you entered. As you listen to the homily, please reflect on the following question for conversation during the breakout rooms. Does the term white supremacy have more meaning for we white people if we understand it as the water we swim in? And I'll explain that a little bit more in my remarks. So thank you everyone for being here today, and it's good to see you all. That particular reading, which isn't a reading, it's actually a very old saying, is partly true. I lived in a Zen Buddhist monastery for a year when I was living in Oregon, and we had interviews with our teacher every day. Her name was is Jan Chosen Bays, and the part of the story that's true is I did forget to take my shoes off when I went into the interview room, which is a big no-no in Zen Buddhism. That is an atrocious thing to do. And I had totally forgotten to take my shoes off because I was nervous. It was the beginning of my training. I wanted to make a good impression. And so Chosen was always very gracious about such things. but it reminded me that I wasn't paying very much attention, even though I wanted to. So, sit down, shut up, pay attention. If any of you know anything about Zen Buddhist practice, it comes right down to it. They're very blunt. And when I lived in a monastery, I learned all kinds of variations on the sit down, shut up, pay attention mantra. But what they did was they cut to the core of what practice was all about within the Zen tradition, which tends to be very sparse, not a lot of ritual, not a lot of ornateness, but simply sit down, shut up, pay attention. So I've been wondering lately how might these words might help focus our American conversation about race. I'm thinking those 6 words might express what we as white people in this country must do if we're going to make headway in the reckoning of race and racism in America, because it is indeed now. So sit down, create a space for awakening. Getting ready to do meditation every day or getting ready to do some kind of spiritual practice every day says we have to do it. In this tradition, it's sit down on your mat, on your cushion, in your chair, and just prepare. Prepare space for awakening. Don't say, I'll get around to it someday, because someday is now. Shut up. It's pretty straightforward. Those of us that do meditation know that the mind does not enjoy being still and quiet. You've heard probably the expression monkey mind, which I think is a little bit overhyped, but it is a way of understanding that our minds are going in all directions all the time, and when we sit to meditate, it doesn't stop. So settling the mind takes practice. How do we move away from distractions? For any conversation about race, shutting up, or more politely, creating quiet or spaciousness, means taking time and tuning out all the distractions on our plates. Don't be distracted by thoughts that say, well, I'm not racist, or, well, what about racism among Black people? Doesn't matter. What matters is that we are here to sit and listen and learn. The third one, pay attention. Are there examples of racism that you've seen or experienced in your life? Do you avoid going into certain parts of Pittsburgh or even Meadville? What are your own experiences and thoughts of a lifetime with this particular intensity that we carry with us around race? What do your own experiences and thoughts tell you? Now we know that the trials and tribulations of Black Americans have been with us for 400 and more years. I don't know if any of you saw the 1619 project from the New York Times. It came out just a few months ago. It aroused much controversy because it depicted a quite different American founding story than the ones we learn in school. Criticisms of the project director, Nicole Hannah-Jones, her interpretation of American history, are still being debated. For example, one central premise is that the Revolutionary War was not focused so much on freedom from Britain, but more to support the slave trade and slavery. As you might imagine, there's been significant criticism about the premise of the 2019 project. Of the 1619 project. But what it does, whether it's correct or not, is it challenges the accepted story of the founding. It tells us a different story of our American history from a non-white perspective. And I don't know about you, but that is not comfortable because it challenges everything we've been known and taught over our lifetimes. Now, we do know that the story of slavery and its aftermath through the current day continues to haunt us. George Floyd's murder, along with the killings and injuries to other Black people this summer, brought attention once again to what the author Jim Willis has called America's original sin. He writes in that book, and it was published a number of years ago, he writes in the book that the very language of anti-racism is painful for us to understand, let alone put into practice, because the language itself is changed to a different method or a different interpretation than we understand. So here's one expression. One term I wrestled with for the last few years is white supremacy. We've all heard the term. I heard it first from people in Seattle who were very much involved in something called critical race theory. It's also something very much within the UUA right now, which the leadership is very focused on and wants us to be focused on. When I first heard the term, though, white supremacy, I couldn't help but think of, well, the KKK, corrupt law enforcement, segregation. And I thought, I'm not a white supremacist. And I still wrestle with that term. And later on, though, I heard another expression which made more sense to me. The phrase I heard was, white supremacy is the water we swim in. The water we swim in. So imagine being a fish and you're swimming along. The water is just there. Just like as we walk here or are around here and we're breathing the air we're in, we pay no attention because it's simply just there. The water we swim in. As white people, we live and breathe in a white-oriented culture. We drive the roads of America not too worried about going slightly over the speed limit or being near the license plate expiration date. We as white people go to restaurants and assume that we'll be welcomed and seated. We go to stores and assume that no one is going to surreptitiously follow us around who's in security, just in case we're going to steal something. We assume we can rent a home without added credit checks or neighbor concerns. I still resist the term white supremacy, and maybe you do too. What if I changed one word? What if I changed it to male supremacy? Even now, males in America make more money, have fewer obstacles in jobs or education than do women or people within the trans community, for example. Are you aware that it was only in 1974, I know, a long time ago, it was only in 1974 that Congress passed an act allowing women to have their own credit cards and credit records. You'll be interested to know that the lawyer who helped create that Supreme Court ruling that led to the law was the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg before she went on high court. Supremacy takes many forms. White supremacy, male supremacy, American supremacy. What do we learn from them? Well, we've all experienced tragedy this year. The pandemic, the economic downturns, the harsh politics. And frankly, I would like to just turn off the news for another year or two until things get back to normal. I don't know about you, but that's what I'd like to do. Here's the problem, and I'm going to talk about that more in 2 weeks when I do a service on stewardship for the future. We've all experienced all that tragedy and we'd love to have it go back to normal, but it's not going back. Normal, as we remember it, is no longer with us. We have entered a new, an unknown, and dangerous path for us all as a community and a world. We can't go back now. And it's certainly still true that people like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and other Black Americans who have been killed this year by law enforcement are simply the newest names on a long, tragic list of those killed by police or by citizens or being dragged down the street or being lynched in the past. We still have to face all of that. More Black people are purchasing guns to protect themselves. And as you might expect, more whites are doing the same. Can we imagine what might happen as a result of that? And in fairness, we know it's not only Black people whose lives are endangered or at risk. I have a slogan on my Facebook profile photo that says, "All lives won't matter until Black lives do. All lives won't matter until Black lives do." And a number of people, including some relatives who are quite conservative, appreciate that because it's more holistic, if you will. That yes, all lives do matter, but they don't matter now quite as much as the ones right in front of us of Black lives. But we can't forget brown lives, homeless lives, American Indian lives, white impoverished lives. They all matter too. So where on earth do we start? Well, there are some excellent books by Black American activists and academics. The one that Amy quoted in the opening words was from this particular writer. He is an excellent, not only academic, but his reading is very, well, readable to us. And it has some very, very good information in it. How to be an anti-racist Ibram X. Kendi. And I think some people on the board actually have been reading this as well. His words in the opening words were, like fighting an addiction, being an anti-racist requires persistent self-awareness, constant self-criticism, and regular self-examination. And before I close, I want to have us focus on those words, like fighting an addiction. Some of us, and you all know that I'm a recovering alcoholic for the last 18 years. Many of us have faced addictions to substances or behaviors that can destroy us because eventually they isolate us, and the only thing more important than a drink or whatever it might be we're addicted to is death. So what if we are, as a culture, as a white culture, addicted to our white cultural values and stories? And I took it a step farther, wondering if the current racial reckoning in America that we are in right now is like an intervention. And I don't know if any of you have familiarity with intervention with an addict. And it is intense. What happens is the person is sat down and friends and family gather in front of the person and say, we have something to talk about because we're worried that you are destroying yourself and you're destroying us as well. That's what an intervention is about. It's about telling the truth, not from the addict's perspective, but from those who are affected directly and indirectly by the addiction. So later on this fall, I'd like to start a racial reckoning discussion group in the next couple of months. I can guarantee you it will not be like living in a monastery. You will not get up at 3:50 in the morning. You do not have to sit in comfortable positions, but I'm going to suggest that we take this particular book and we start working with it. And he has some really well thought out ways that we can question ourselves and our assumptions. But if we do it, we're going to have some rules. And the rules are very simple. Sit down, shut up, pay attention. Because in this era, that's what awakening in America is going to be all about. And it's really up to us as Americans to help show the way. So we're going to go into breakout rooms now. And Amy, if we could get back to the question. Does the word term white supremacy have more meaning for we as white people if we understand it as the water we swim in?
It looks like everybody's back. I'd like to light one candle for Pete LaBar, Amelia's husband. Pete was hospitalized briefly this week for an incident of dropping blood pressure. He is back home, and I would just like us to focus our good thoughts and intentions on Pete. And as usual, I'd like to light a second virtual candle for all of the joys and sorrows that we hold deep in our hearts that are just a bit too private at this moment to share more widely.
So let us take a few moments of quiet time to remember why we are here on a Sunday morning, this beautiful Sunday morning. We are sitting in front of our monitors and screens, listening to one of the more difficult conversations in American history. And we're doing that because we care. We care about ourselves and we care about others. So in a quiet time, we're reflecting not just on the one sorrow that we heard here today and the ones unspoken, but imagining all of the incredible courage so many people have, not only in this country, but around the world, or the curiosity that people have about, well, what are some good ways to work through this? These interventions that we're going through. What is a way to be kind as we move through this? Sometimes with pain. Sometimes, what will the next joy or sorrow be in my life? How do we be courageous? How do we be curious? How do we be kind? Let's take a few more moments of quiet. Thank you. And now, as I get ready to extinguish the church chalice, these words: let us go now in peace. Deeply regard each other. Truly listen to each other. Speak what each of you must speak. Be ready in any moment to disarm your own heart, and always live as if a realm of love had begun. May it be so. Blessed be. Namaste. Peace to us all. Amen.
And so ends our service for this morning. Thank you again, all of you, for attending.